Hi, and welcome to Chialogue, a space where we pause, talk, and reflect on life. I'm Sandy, and today we are diving into something that hit me unexpectedly, the music we leave behind when we try to fit in. This episode starts with a moment since last Sunday. My sister sent me a concert clip of my youth favorite singer from Hong Kong. I hadn't heard his voice in years, but the second I hit play, I was suddenly flooded with feelings, memories, and ache, and realized I hadn't listened to Chinese music since moving abroad. And it got me wondering, when we live between cultures, how much do we shift what we listen to adapt, and how music shapes culture belonging, and whether we ever really leave the songs of our roots behind. So I've invited two brilliant music producers who know what's like to create and navigate between cultures. First, we have Song, a talented Chinese music producer based in Berlin, whose works blends emotions with modern expression. Hi, Song.
Hi,
Would you like to introduce yourself and your music?
my name is Yun Song. I came to Berlin for 3 years. I do mostly experimental music with audiovisual, and what I mainly focus is drone music. Or, you can call it IDM, even though I don't like to use this phrase, but it was from the artists like Aphex Twin, Alltech, this kind of electronic music. It's not very mainstream, I would say.
Do you want to talk about the music you recently created?
Yes, recently I made a film with a director, so I composed music for the film, and she shot the film. So we're gonna premiere this on the 14th. From my perspective, when I saw it, her style is like Wang Jiawei. No, I think she definitely has that kind of feelings. She definitely, that director gave me this impression. So I couldn't speak for the whole work, because but maybe one day it will be online.
You've been living abroad in the States, Australia, and now in Germany. Before you leave your home, do you remember the kind of music you listened to when you're growing up?
I listened to Jay Chou when I grew up. That's I listened to him a lot, and also a lot of singers from Taiwan, also from Hong Kong, and also Korean groups. Back then, when I was in high school, I listened to do you know Alva?
Eva is Xiao Yaxuan.
I think after a while I started getting into more English spoken music. But when I was grow up, it's mostly Chinese pop songs, Korean pop songs, and occasionally a lot of film soundtracks, of course, because I love watching films when I grow up. So that's the music I listen to when I grow up.
Yeah, I can find some similarities between us, like you're from China and from Taiwan, but doesn't matter because it's very similar during the time phrase, I would say. Also, when I was a kid, our main market is the Hong Kong mainstream singers, and also a lot of Japanese pop song influenced Taiwan back then. I remember it was until I were in junior high school, that's where all the Taiwanese pop songs developed. For me, Chinese pop songs are very deep in emotions and often express the sorrow of a broken heart, or like capture with poetic and metaphorical lyrics.
Yeah, true.
And that emotion, it felt so normal back then. But now, when I compare to mainstream Western pop songs, the energy is really different. And I'm
Yes.
curious, do you feel the same? And what's your take on that contrast with Western pop music?
Yes, I feel the same. I actually had a conversation with one of my friends. We all feel Chinese pop songs mainly focusing on the heartbroken lyrics and very sad vibe, also melancholy vibe. I think it originated because a lot of Chinese pop music come from this jazz background, like live jazz and also live band performance. The Western pop music is, firstly, it is more uplifting. It is definitely very party oriented nowadays. Also, because it was made for a lot of festivals, a lot of commercial advertisements. The commercialization of Western pop music is huge. So I think comparing to that, the Chinese pop music was more emotional, melancholic. It does have more storytelling, I feel. Because nowadays, I feel most of Western pop music is not really about the heartbroken emotions. But for Chinese pop music, it's very orientated in this sad and also every time when people have a heartbroken moment, they went to the karaoke. They
Oh
just sing
yes.
all night, you know. It is very different. At one point of my life, I don't really like the Chinese pop music that much because I feel it is very heavy emotionally, and I don't know why every time my friends just go into karaoke and just cry all night and drinking all night, sing all of those sad songs. But now I start appreciating more because now I feel the Western pop music is a little bit too artificial to me nowadays. It's not really that real.
I do have a very similar feelings towards to this kind of contraction between Chinese songs versus Western pop songs. I remember when I start to live abroad, I stopped to listen to Chinese songs because I also feel, wow, that kind of emotional drag was very heavy to me. It's very sad and it kind of get me into the loop of emotional sadness. But at the same time, I also feel it can really capture some situations in life, like heartbroken or a friendship. And Western music for me is, as you say, like party and easygoing. Can I share one thing with you, Xiaosong?
Yes, yes.
When I first went to Australia, I had very little exposure to Western pop music culture, and I only knew a few of the popular artists. And there was like two moments in that period that really hit me so badly about get into Western music. The first one was when I was in working holiday, and then when all the colleagues they get together and trying to sing a song one by one, and then they
Yeah.
just point to me, and now it's my turn to sing, and then I had no
Uh-huh.
idea what they are singing. And then they were so surprised by how little I know about Western music. So that was the first one. And the second one was when I studied in the TAFE school in the classroom when we are doing some preparations. And my teammates start to sing, and then they think it's a good gesture to invite me singing together. And I was like, hang on, I don't know what's going on here. But it was actually a very popular song from Bruno Mars.
Oh,
And I
okay.
was like, I cannot fit into even the school. So that's why I start to exposure myself into Western music because I don't want to be an outsider that comes to self-reflection for me. I would want to know why did I stop listening to Chinese songs and was I trying to blend into a new culture or I was quietly invisible a part of myself? That's my reflection recently. And I would like to hear from your own experience. Like, have you ever stopped listening to your familiar music when moving to a new place or working in an international environment?
Yes, I have. Every time moving to a new place, I try to adapt myself to that environment. So also it means music. So, but nowadays I do listen back to the Chinese pop song more and more because it echoes with something in my heart, in my memories. But I understand because when I first go aboard, actually it's also Australia. It was yeah, you do. There are a few moments you feel like, I'm not fitting in here. But I imagine if they go to Asia, I think they will feel the same way. I think it's just a reality that English spoken song is more, I would say, widespread in the world, so people can sing with it more. And but after a while, what I realized is it's not really about the quality of the music. It's just more people are speaking English. That's it, and more people were in the English spoken world and it's easily accessible for. But I mean, if I say like, I think if Jay Chou speak English, he can also be very popular. So I don't think it really matters like to say I want to fit in, or I think that we just listen whatever we like right now.
Yeah, and you are producing music right now. What does it feel like to write like or produce music in your own language versus a second language?
I actually prefer my second language to writing music, mainly because, firstly, my first language, there are a lot of things I couldn't say, so politically or socially. So it's hard for me to express my ideas fully. But I'm trying to learn how to do it. But obviously, considering where I came from, that's why I switched to English more. So I can dodge the criticism more. And but also because nowadays a lot of my music inspiration does come from West. Most of them come from the this either electronic music or pop music or hip hop. I'm still trying to figure out how can I make my own voice into this environment. I couldn't say I already know what to like to fit in or to but for me, actually, the process is kind of similar to me. No matter the language, but of course, I feel the person who speaks English is a little bit different. It's like a different charisma. Like I have two personality here. One is speaking Mandarin, one is speaking English. So now I do embrace English side more.
Okay, but once a while you will go back and then to review the old songs.
Because I think a lot of things where we Chinese were we Asians we experience something different emotionally. So it's best to balance the both.
Yeah, that's true. Can I say Chinese songs are more lyrics orientated? Like the meaning behind the lyrics are very deep. Oftentimes when we express ourselves, when we are talking, if we speak in Chinese, we would say, oh, I don't know how to express the feeling, that just let it be, or just embrace the silence more than speaking something. I think with pop songs, give us a channel or provides a voice for us to express our complicated feelings. So during the time in Berlin, have there been moments when hearing an old song from your culture hits you unexpectedly?
You're asking me, did I ever experience it? A lot of times. Because the environment is so contrast. In Berlin, it's very gray, dark. 90s and some Chinese songs, and he's very different, much more emotional.
And what do you make of that emotional pool?
You mean how do I deal with it?
Yeah.
To be honest, it was more like a history for me. Like every time when I visit these Chinese songs, it's like visiting my childhood, so visiting the history archive just to check in. Nothing more than that. Every time it's like going back to my childhood, like visiting the past, just for memory purpose. Think about good stuff happening in the past.
I think music is really an ongoing thing in our life, right? It's such big part of our life that we cannot live without.
Yes, but I do find a lot of Chinese songs were actually more complicated than I previous thought. Because when I research more on their lyrics, let's say Ethan, I mean his lyrics is so beautiful. Like I think Cantonese and Chinese are a very abstract language. You have to feel like guess the meanings of that. So I think it's beautiful.
Yes, exactly. In Chinese, there are a lot of metaphorical meanings inside of it. It depends on the person's interpretation towards to the meanings of lyrics compared to straightforward like English phrases. I think that's why like listen to these Cantonese songs or Chinese songs can really resonate a lot from the folks.
Yeah, true. I totally agree. I think the language itself, I can only speak about English and Mandarin. So for me, English is a very clear language. Like each words, each letters is very clear. But for Mandarin, each letter might mean so many things. It creates more abstractions with the Chinese letters and Chinese words, also the lyrics. I mean, that's why I think it's great for writing very meaningful songs with the emotions, because there are so many space. But for English music, how they try to be poetic is very different. A lot of English songs were very deep also, but I think it's deep in different ways than Mandarins. It's more imaginative. It's more imagination driven. It takes you to a trip. It takes you to many places, like let's say Pink Floyd or maybe the old David Bowie. It's also very abstract, but in a very different way. I think they're focusing more on the concept, the thing they want to express. It's just a different structure. Then it creates totally different music. There are a lot to research on this topic. I think it's a huge topic. It's a cultural difference.
It is huge. I recently read an article, and it's about compare Chinese vocal music versus the Western vocal music. And even from this, there's a lot of differences and comparison about how the culture and the emotions behind this kind of performance. And
Wow.
that's very interesting because apparently East culture and West culture emphasize and value different aspects when doing a performance. In this research, it shows Chinese vocal music is more emotional, expressive, while the Western one is more like a storytelling. They try to give you a concept.
I mean, the lucky.
Just say to someone who feels torn between staying true to their cultural identity and blending in through music or language.
I would say stick who you are. That's the most important suggestion from my perspective. Because I moved to many places and I do feel every time my identity switched when I moved to a new place, trying to adapt, trying to learn from something new. I mean, it's great, but don't throw away everything from the past. It could be very beautiful. There was a stage when I went to the US. I mainly only listened to like English spoken songs, a lot of hip hop, a lot of rock. But then my personality switched. I become more westernized. But after a couple of years, especially going back to China after that journey, I discover more beauty within my own cultures. So when I look back, I just feel like, wow, there's no need to like totally say, oh, like Chinese, like our music were not as good as the Western one. I don't think we should have this kind of mentality. But also at the same time, I think we definitely should go out more to learn more music to explore music from all over the world, because what I notice also is like a lot of my friends, they either are too westernized to they only listen to the songs from outside of the Asia, or they only listen the Chinese pop song or Korean pop songs or Japanese pop songs. So it's just different groups. I really suggest everyone should just embrace everything, just to know this culture, know that culture. Don't be too egoistic or about like this kind of defensive, I would say. Don't be too defensive.
That's very, very insightful from you and from your own experience. Is there anything you would like to add that I didn't ask and you think is important to share?
I will add one more about identity. I think every time we listen to a music, our identity shifts with that music. It's like we almost become that person, that singers at that moment. I think it's important to not get attached to their identity, you know. To say, because sometimes we love certain music too much, we worship certain music. But if we get sober a bit and just look what's happening, you can see a lot of Western music nowadays is very commercial. Like it's very business oriented and it's not as exciting as it used to be. So I think we should get rid of this. Oh, the pop stars from the Americas, Bruno Mars or Rihanna. I mean, they're great, but nowadays I just feel like they're probably not as good as some of the people I met who play at a small venues or play at experimental music festivals. I think it's important to explore more and discover our identity more. We have so many faces in our identity. It's not just one.
Yeah.
I mean, the lucky stuff is like we have both as someone. Like we can listen both. So I mean, that's a lucky.
I've never think about this part. Very interesting point to get into identity and culture adapting.
I mean, there's no need to choose like left or right. It's just like we all need both, right? We need this.
It's such a positive way to think about this rather than choosing a side.
Yeah, we spend too much time choosing sides, but sometimes it's just like eating foods. We don't eat one food for all times. Eat everything. I'm tired of switching sides, but I just enjoy anything that fits in that moment as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Xiaosong. Hello, David. Welcome.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining with us. I want to know how music affect our emotions and how it shifts our identity when we live abroad. You are a music producer. You may help us to find out.
I'm a fan of melancholic music because that really moves me deeply. And that's like where it starts for me. It's like what kind of music really moves you and impacts you. And I always had the feeling that happy music is, of course, good, but it's a very short span of a positive emotion. And melancholic music for me always had this dragging kind of behavior. It's really able to impact you quite deeply in your soul. And that's what I experienced. But it's really hard to tell because there are songs, they are having so many minor chords in them, but the lyrics there or the way it's sung, it's really positive. So you can even mix the emotions. So it's really hard to tell and really dependent from each to another artist or even song, one to another. But I made the experience that I have a feeling that I'm more drawn towards melancholic music because it's a longer lasting emotional experience and it sounds a little more truthful to me. But I think that's really up to every individual on how to perceive it.
David, you focus more on electronic music and pop music.
I started as a guitar player originally, and my dad pretty early on kind of like infected me with guitar-based music. So there were always these blues legends, B. King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Hendrix, of course, later on. And then there was the band music having major impacts on my musical, how I evolved. Meanwhile, because I came to Berlin and there's so much electronic music and then everything was kind of mixed, I felt the beauty of having a good guitar recorded and then from there on going on and having a production going, which goes more towards an electronic based music sometimes, but it's pretty much a mixture, I think.
I listen to your music on Spotify. I really love it. You use so well presented like video images and the lyrics itself. It's very beautiful. For me, I'm highly consumed on lyrics than the music itself. I can feel these emotions directly when I'm listening to music. Your music, it's simply beautiful and sad.
It's just like what was there, what was in me at the time, and I had to bring it out at some point. And sometimes it's easier for me to be real and when I'm doing melancholic music, so I'm more able to feel it, and with it, it's easier for me to translate it, to make it to music, the emotions.
When you say translate, what do you mean?
Well, sometimes it starts with an emotion in your head. Sometimes it's the other way around. It starts with a melody, a riff on a guitar, or with a lyric. It's never been the same way with each song, you know, how it started. Sometimes it was a phrase and there's no painter who's able to draw a picture or paint a picture if he's never seen any other picture from another artist. So that's kind of like the same with music. You can only create something new if you already had listened to a certain amount of music, and that really impacts you and forms your identity as an artist. That's also like a kind of experience which then in the end kind of like forms your unique character as an artist. So coming back to your question, I think it starts with an emotion sometimes. So you feel a little sad maybe, or melancholic or sentimental, and then you decide, okay, I'm gonna do music because I feel it deeply. And then you just sit down, take the guitar on your lap and you play a few chords, and then maybe there's a melody. And this melody can be like a fragment of a melody you already heard so because we can't like reinvent the wheel, like Beatles, they wrote it all already basically. So you can just like come up with new ideas, and it's like a recycling, but it's nice because then on the other hand, if you release a song, that's also gonna affect other musicians and people just by listening to it.
I think that's where the idea comes from. And then you use music or guitar as a vehicle to translate your feelings into a physical product.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like with translation, it's like there's like a certain type of inner speech or language, and the question is how do I enable myself to translate it to actual music? Like the instruments I'm going to use, the notes that I'm going to play, what kind of like figures are popping up in the procedure? Or maybe it's better described as a conversion process. Like how do I convert an idea to real music people are able to listen to?
Thanks for sharing this process, how you start with just one idea and make it into real music. I would also like to know, you are born and raised in Germany, right?
Yeah.
What kind of music you listen to when you grow up?
When I was pretty young, I think I was around 6 years of age. Of course, like childs, they always have like these books, and sometimes there's even like coming music out of the books. So that's like music for children, right? But at some point when I started to recognize music, I was around 5-ish, and I would always like sing Robbie Williams, Backstreet Boys when my parents were gone. I was alone at home and I was on the stairs and there was no embarrassment. So I wouldn't blame myself, so I could like sing. And as you're a child, you're easily and able to reach all the higher notes and all that. But it was just like gibberish. I didn't know what I really was singing. I come from southern Germany originally, so the English isn't quite well down there. It may be different here in Berlin for sure. But well, when I was 6 years of age, my parents approached my brother and me and they said, would you like to play an instrument? And I said, yeah, I want to be a drummer. And then as my dad said, like, sorry, brother, gonna happen because my office is right above the basement. So, and if you're gonna drum down there, I'm not gonna be able to. Would you maybe mind playing guitar? Because we have like this old rusty thing. So I got the old guitar of my mom. It was a wooden thing from the 70s, probably, like a classical guitar, like the one you will always find in some household, standing like dusty somewhere in the corner. And my brother, he got a new one, and then we started to have guitar lessons together. But the music I listened to back then, like I started to play guitar with 9, and with 6 years of age, that was like the sparkling moment. So I was standing in front of the hi-fi, my dad, and then he said, like, take the headphones. Like, would you mind listening? That's really cool. I got to show you something. And then I just took on the headphones, and then he played me some music. And the first artist, as I remember back, was Bill Haley. Rock Around the Clock, absolute rock and roll classics. It was crazy for me. The energy that was delivered was crazy, and I was just jumping around and feeling good. And I never heard anything like that. And I was immediately impacted, and I wanted to get more and more of that. So I listened to a whole bunch of CDs and albums of my dad, because back in the time in the 90s, you would collect like a whole storage space if you were able. I mean, it was also an experience. You had to pay a lot, to get it. So it was like at least $10. And if the album was new and had to come from the States, where the music usually came from, then it was $17 once I remembered. So, but he had a whole bunch, also like older CDs from the 80s. And then I listened to B.B. King, Eric Clapton. That was kind of like the music that was always running. It was always like blues music, and rarely there was like classical music, but that was like the first musical experience I had as a child, which kind of like directed me into that direction. And then the guitar came.
Can I say it's a bit unusual that someone like you like grew up with this music influence? I don't think like the other kids like in Germany, they get this kind of treatment as a kids, like with parents really focus on like good music, because I would expect maybe you should listen to like German pop songs while growing up, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I really got lucky. Like I had friends, like the kind of music they listened to and also the parents listened to, it was like folks music and stuff like that. Stuff that kind of like embarrassed me back then, even as a child, to listen to. Like stuff my grandparents would listen to that was running through their radios sometimes, but they were way younger than my grandparents. So I always asked myself, how is it possible? Have they never ever themselves evolved as a listener? But of course, if they never had any idea of popular music at the time, and also like the wide range of popular music, because there's a blues, R&B, hip hop, and electronic dance music, everything is like pop is like the overtitle, and then all the subgenres come, or they're kind of like within it. But pop originally comes from blues music and jazz music. Meanwhile, pop is everything, you could say. But I always questioned myself, how is it possible that I able to listening to blues music, and why is my dad drawn to that? Maybe it was part of his own history that he was 17 years of age and he'd play like Clearwater Revival, Susie Q, so these types of songs, and he was just himself drawn towards rock music. So as his kid, but there was always also like the Backstreet Boys, Robbie Williams and Madonna, of course. So popular music it was basically, but blues was always his heart music. I think that was the earliest music affected me.
You mentioned a little bit about what other friends listen to, which kind of affect your identity when you listen to folk music. When I moved to Australia, I started to listen more pop music because I guess I got identity issues. I cannot blend into the locals or the parties if I don't listen to pop music. So
which is also quite sad, right?
Like from your perspective, when you produce music or when you have your own tour, what's happening or what do you experience when you're having a German root but you are producing English songs? What's happening during this phase?
I was never really drawn towards German music. It's not that I don't like it, but it's like the first music I've ever heard was always in English. So musically speaking, that was always like my mother language. But of course, I'm a native German, and would be quite easier sometimes to write it down a text like lyrics, language wise. But it's just also the way it sounds for me. It sounds a little more fluent and like the English. So that was why I was drawn towards that. And then I figured working towards other producers who then work for way bigger artists internationally, I figured like, okay, it's not like Germany has really evolved in the music industry. It was very different. Like 20 years ago in the 2000s, you could always almost immediately hear if it was the German producer behind it, or like maybe even like 15 years ago. But that really changed because we have all these young bedroom producers, and they have the laptop and a mic and speakers, and then they start, and sometimes they're even as early as 12 years of age. They just look up YouTube, and then they know how to produce a beat. So they get good really early on. And I studied music, jazz and popular music. I did my bachelor degree 10 years ago. The thinking about music and the theory, that's like a whole nother world. But music industry nowadays, it's never waited for people to graduate from a school and then come and say, hey, I'm done, let's do music. No, it's never been that way. I think it was always the brave ones who said, I just want to play the guitar in your band. Is that okay? So there always had to be like a part, like a certain sympathy. Are you a fit-in or does it not work out? And like, are you attracted to that person? Are you willing to do music together with this person? And then the bands were evolving, and people decided to do music together. So it was never about, is there anyone who has like graduated from a jazz school? In popular music, it's very different. It's really like very opportunistic, and you just need to be good really fast. And there's kids, like there's 16 years of age, and they do all the trap beats for crazy huge rappers sometimes. I mean, that's also like miracle stories, but it's more and more than that. And also like with the guitar players, they've gotten so good with a certain age. And when I was younger, the internet wasn't as accessible. And there wasn't as fast internet as we have it now. So there was like the access was not always given, or maybe there was just one household having one computer. So, but now the kids, they can just like look up their smartphone and learn from another guitarist who's, I don't know, 2,000 miles away. And that's also like with the producers. So there's very young people joining the music industry. And of course, all the major labels, they kind of like grab all the young
fresh blood.
Exactly. That's how it goes. And because it's just about economy in the end. So that's also frustrating to see. But I think like it's never been about music itself really within the industry. It was always like a product that they had to place and somehow sell to the people. So that's kind of like gotten into my maths of how I should do music, that you're considering commercialized music. That you bring in elements, samples, sounds that may access other listeners also to wanting to listen to your sounds, to your songs. And that was very different back then.
So back to what you just answered me before, modern music producing, there's not much of music identity involved. Correct me if I'm saying something wrong.
Well, yeah, it's very different. The artists themselves, they really have to have identity because that's the seller in the end. But the people that work towards, or like the popular music industry, it's really gotten like a mishmash of everything, So it kind of like copies itself over and over again because you figure this one works and then another one tries to have the same success. So there's a lot of copying as well. But at the same time, when you look up the today's hits, there as well is reinventing stuff. There's like artists and they make use of the sounds of the 80s, which is also not like the newest thing to do right now because The Weeknd did it like almost 5 years ago, and some people, they still do it. So there's always like these eras which pop artists tend to go back to, which is totally fine. It's also interesting to see. because every and each of these eras had their unique sound and instrumentation, and it's like a culture that's reinventing itself. And of course, it has to be like a cycle, but the cycle turns around way faster, and that's just because the machine needs to be fed, which is a problem if you talk about a huge platform, a streaming service. In my opinion, how music evolved, which is quite sad.
Do you find your identity in the music industry?
Well, my music is pretty indie, I think. Of course, it's also pop. And then you put the two words together and you say it's indie pop from a commercial standpoint, saying I'm independent because I got no label and the music that I'm doing is not fully pop music, but there's a lot of pop in there. That's just the structure of the songs, basically. And even like there's a lot of folk in there because it's always a guitar that binds everything together. And then I usually come up with a production which makes it a little more huge. So it's not the typical singer-songwriter where you only have a guitar and a singer. If you upload a song on a distributor, you really need to know exactly what your song is resembling. And that's a problem sometimes because there's so much influence going into that. So even the same artists nowadays, sometimes on one album, there's so many different types of songs, and within them, there's so many different types of genre. So it's like a mishmash of everything because people always, they need to be excited today. They don't want to lean back and listen to an album like they tend to do like 20, 30 years ago. So there's always needs to be a surprising element somewhere in there. So they constantly change how one song to another sounds. It's not always the case, but talking about the major artists, it's you can really observe something like that.
Before our talk, I was thinking the identity issue might be between cultures. But after talking with you, I figure out from your perspective, it's much deeper. It's more how you rap yourself and how you present music.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfectly like you say. You kind of need to decide on what kind of product you want to deliver. And it sounds really unemotional. And indeed it is. Like from a perspective of the industry, it's very emotionless. But you as an artist have to make an effort to resemble some kind of artist that has an identity.
To produce music from lyrics and the melody, everything needs to be fully processed. Everything we hear really echoes to some part of our thought and then part of our feelings. That's definitely not easy. You can sit one day and then suddenly nice song came out.
Yeah. Absolutely. I totally believe that music means so much to people. I mean, they listen to it every day. If you're in a subway and coming home from work, whatever, you had like a bad day and you just want a little background music, or maybe it really drags you down and you're really deeply into emotion. Music can take every role. And on the other hand, how it's delivered by the musicians, because of course we do it like emotionally. So, but also there's like part of the industry that are just feeding the machine. And the tools have gotten really easy, to make a song come alive. We are also talking about AI at this point, so you don't need to have any knowledge within music to just make a song and release it. It's really gotten really easy. It changed the game a lot because like the rivalry and then there's also ghostwriters. Well, that's really a deep dive within, but there's ghostwriters and they kind of like feed the machine and they get paid from the major labels. So they produce music that's perfectly being received then from the consumers. So that's how I receive it. Meanwhile,
I think I cannot fully understand like within the whole process, but I understood that it's a very challenging industry.
It is. I think it's always been that way. I mean, even in the 60s or when Johnny Cash walked up to one of record labels and he knocked the door and they said like, "Who are you? Go away." And then he came back and he was hesitant and then they let him play one or two songs and then they were convinced, okay, this guy has got something. It was the same with Bob Dylan, and they all have to sneak in their way somehow and be received as the artists they already have been. It's always been hard. That's just part of the game, I think. There's too many people wanting to do music, But as I always expected it to be different when I was younger, that's just the naive part of listening to Foo Fighters and Nirvana and thinking like, wow, I would like to be the same at some, and then you figure like, wow, it's so complex and there's so many ways, and you can do it with a guitar, without a guitar, you can be a beat maker. There's so many subgenres, even that is crazy. Like I said, when you want to upload a song to be released on a store, like on Spotify, for example, how precise you have to be to make clear it's resembling that genre. So this is really stuff that's perfectly describing on how it's going today. Like, because you need to do it all by yourself. You could obviously hire someone to do all the uploading part and distribution, but it's very pricey. Like everything costs anything. That's clear. But now everyone is able to release their music, which is also beautiful. Come on, it's quite different compared to 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, things like internet and the AI tools really opens up a gate for people who wants to produce music. It's been a dream for them, and now it's just more easier compared to 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And you don't need to have like a crazy big studio, like a Neve console that costs $500,000, or you just need to have a PC, a laptop, a microphone, and you're good to go. If you have an idea and production software, you can easily do great stuff at home. For real. Even huge artists, sometimes they hesitate to go to huge spaces because the music they tend to write at home is obviously differs to what they would do in a huge space, a huge studio in the middle of London or New York or LA. So they tend to do it in their bedroom because it's like the intimacy they are seeking. Because to come back to the early stage of our interview, like the emotional part, to capture that ghost, that spirit, it's way easier to be in an intimate place where it's silent, where you may be all by your own, and you may just have a guitar on your lap and a microphone in front of you, and you're singing deeply from your soul, or you're just capturing a demo, and then you take that and go to a huge studio if you're able to. But that really has a huge change. And nowadays, people are just producing their music at home, and that's where the term bedroom producer comes from. And then they just upload it, and they're good to go. And this is really crazy. That's a major difference to how it behaved years ago, I think.
That's a new era to blend in as well, not only from the consumer side, but also from a producer's perspective. Maybe you also give yourself an answer how to upload a reel. Every day when there's a clip or a melody in your head, just capture this and then upload.
Yeah, right. I should be way more spontaneous, and that why holding back. But sometimes, obviously, we know like about Instagram that everyone wants to be received by the best side of them, and the way you display yourself with carousel posts or whatever, it's like you're showing this crazy good life, and but at the same time you're not always feeling like that, and then you may hesitate to, or you're holding back content that really shows yourself because you think it doesn't look as good as on the other side, so you're holding back. But I think I'm speaking for like the majority of people that are using Instagram platforms, that you just want to be received by a happy person that's leading a good life. But you're totally right, like the spontaneous part, just like record a little just as you go. You don't even need to upload anything and say like, yeah, I need to release that.
You need to wait until you have a full song.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, it's absolutely your right to then say, no, I don't feel about releasing this song or this idea. Because like coming from a demo and having like you sketch down something and then you say like to make a full production out of that and then have it mixed and have it mastered and then have the whole promotion with all, that's like a crazy journey always. Like every and each single you release a journey. So you start with a blank page and you play a few notes, and then there's ideas. Maybe there's another songwriter in the room, a good friend who's listening over it, and then he says like you could do something there and there and there, and then the structure changes again, and you do some harmonies, then you edit everything, make it as good sounding as possible, cut and trim the ends, have fades going, and then you mix it all. That's like a crazy procedure always, like to have a song finished to be released. So you can't always just like release everything. That's almost impossible. But there's people, they prove me wrong for sure. Like Mac DeMarco, once he just released an album with 200 demos, and they all sound good. You don't even know how that's possible. I think he does it all by himself. He just like captures idea by idea, and then he just figured out why not releasing an album with 200 songs. I couldn't even believe it. I had to look it up on Spotify and check, and then I said like, wow. You can scroll all down to the bottom. It's really 200 songs. Crazy. And then you think, if this guy pulls up something like this, and I'm so hesitant to release anything like he.
That's something we don't normally see. That's very honest sharing from you. Thanks for opening this up.
Thank you too.
Before we close, I just want to share a few reflections from this meaningful conversation. In my talk with Yun Song, we explored how language structure and culture deeply shape the way emotions are expressed through music. He reminds us that when living between cultures, it's important to embrace where we stand and not leave our roots behind. With Jovid, his perspective as a music producer gave us a look into how music is built, from the choice of chords to the artist's personal identity, and how these choices can subtly shape how we feel when we listen. I'm grateful for their insight, and I hope you found something that also speaks to you. If this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with a friend who might enjoy this conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye.